Hey, how we doing, everybody? Welcome to the Ridgeline Athlete channel. If you haven't yet, be sure to subscribe, share with others. My hope is that you spreading the love can help spread more knowledge and also just some really fun stories and adventures that I've had. I'm sure many of you can relate to. So don't hesitate to click that little button down below. My hope is that we will have more and more content to share with you in the future, and just telling stories, learning more about how you can perform at your best in the backcountry, in the sport of life for that matter. But this channel is truly built on that backbone where I want to make sure that folks have the opportunity to have sound knowledge and education in strength and conditioning and how that can effectively transfer to your backcountry adventures, like I'm going to share with you today. So this particular story, this buck was one that I have no history with whatsoever, at least that I'm aware of. I have hunted this area, so this was hunting here in the Northeast, and I have hunted this area. Now, this was my first day into this particular region. I hadn't hunted it yet this season, and I honestly hadn't been in there for 2 years because last year I didn't make it into that particular region. Now, I do have history there. I actually followed a track on that day. I followed a track up onto this ridge that I should say one of my own tracks that from my Onyx. I followed that track up onto the ridge because I knew that that was a good way to travel. I knew that that was a good way to get me into this particular area, and it was a high mountain region that sat above very heavily cut hardwood, and I mean a couple thousand acres of clear cut over the course of this particular road system. So for those that aren't as familiar with hunting in the Northeast, a lot of it is very cut off. And that was the case here. And where I was focusing on was basically the wood and the woods, but the wood that wasn't able to be cut. It got too steep. They aren't able to get into there with equipment, so they leave it. And that would be like your old growth. In this case, it was more old growth softwood with some mixed hardwood. Now, I was up really high. So I followed this track in, one of my own boot tracks from 2 years prior. And just as I had hoped, that led me to a buck track. Now, that buck track wasn't super old, but it wasn't one that I was interested in following for the first day in this particular state in this season. So I followed it, though, to hopefully bring me to other deer, and that's exactly what he did. As long as I knew that this deer was traveling in the direction I generally wanted to go, there was no reason why I shouldn't stay on that track until I found kind of something better. Well, he led me into this very mature big buck, and then I left that smaller track, and I started really trying to sort out this older buck, which was obviously big. All I had found was his beds and scrapes, some other rutting sign, but I never found where he was really all that fired up. He wasn't necessarily chasing. He wasn't at all, at least from the tracks and sign that I found. You could tell that he was starting to get the inkling, scrapes, the rubs, but his tracks were not fresh. So my hope was that in making this swing, I had a great big basin. I was at that point at about 3,000 feet. It was pretty high here in the Northeast, about 3,000 feet, and in that region as well. And I was starting to slab my way across kind of this basin, and I was again working my way. I was up above the cuts, so they've got great feed in these cuts, and then they're able to retreat to the high mountain softwood. So as I worked my way along, and I was kind of cutting his path and his tracks time after time, that's when I like to get into grunting. Now, we had perfect snow conditions, and my feeling was that at some point I was going to cut his track fresh. But I also knew that he lived in that area. I could tell, or at least I had this instinct that he lived there. And you could tell that his tracks, they weren't taking, he wasn't just passing through. He was there. He had been there 3-4 days prior. He had been there yesterday. So again, my hope was that I would just come across his track fresh and game on. You know, it was perfect tracking conditions, quiet snow. We could have used a little bit more wind that day for tracking, but it was altogether perfect. So as I worked my way along, I had the wind in my favor, which is great. That doesn't always happen. In this case, it did. I didn't plan that, just that's the way it worked out. And as I got into what I assumed was his kind of core area, his bedroom, as you might say, that's when I started calling. And I grunt a lot. I really do. I will grunt to cover my own mistake by way of sound. If I, break some branches, or I have to go through an area that is noisy, crunchy leaves, something like that, I'll grunt. And I'll make doe bleats. I'll do other sounds. I'll run like a deer. Things to make in hopes that animal will maybe hold up. Okay, if it hears me coming, hold up just long enough to see me so that maybe I can see and identify that buck and get a shot. But also, there's a chance that you can call these animals in. So as I'm working across, I'll stop and call, and I'll wait for a couple minutes. Now, always make sure that you do that with cover, because these deer, especially when it's quiet conditions, they're not going to come charging in at this time of year. Remember, this is pre-rut. They're not really in chase fight mode yet. And you don't want to be too aggressive. You have to meet them where they are. So that's what I was doing. And it was maybe my third or fourth kind of location where I stopped. I called. That would be a succession of grunts. I never used a doe bleat on that particular day. And then I will wait, for 3, 4, 5 minutes, and then I continue along. Now, in this particular section of woods, it was pretty good going, and it was also good visibility. So I was able to see, and I take pride in being able to stalk very well, move fluidly through the woods, and I know that I'm not going to necessarily bust a deer with the speed that I was moving at. So I don't mind if I'm kind of like moving in the general direction a deer might be coming from after calling. So some people might say, well, if you call, you really should wait for 20 minutes. Yeah, sure. But I'm kind of like calling as I go. I'm looking for a track first and foremost. But if there's a buck around and I know this is his core area, there's no reason why I might try to spark his interest, get him out of his bed. Maybe he's bedded down in a place where I can't see him, where he has the advantage, and I'm going to catch him this way, up and moving, and potentially looking for that other buck. Well, in this situation, that's exactly what happened, and you're going to see that in the video here. Now, I don't typically run a camera rolling, so you're not going to see a shot. You'll see after the shot and walk up to the deer. But the backstory is that I was calling. I just got done that 2 to 3 minute kind of wait, maybe 4 minutes, what have you, something like that. And as I started moving along, I spotted him. He was standing behind a blowdown, and he was looking right at me. After making the shot, getting up to the deer, cleaning him out, and starting the drag, I said, you know what, I want to backtrack that buck, and I want to see exactly what he was doing. And you'll see that in the video as well. And I confirmed that is exactly what he was looking for. And he had heard those calls. He had made a 180, come back up the mountain. And in this situation, that's what got me that buck. I'm confident that that's what got me that deer. Yes, I would have cut his track. After backtracking him, I would have ran right into that track, and potentially, who knows what could have happened at that point. But shooting a deer standing still in front of you is I'll take that any day over chasing that deer over miles and miles and hoping that I get a good shot, which, you know, certainly happens. And I don't mind that, but oh boy, if I can have them right there in front of me, deer that I called in, great, big, mature, 236 pound northern buck, super happy. And yeah, you guys are gonna see kind of the follow up, walking up to the deer here, and also I give some feedback on a switch to a new bullet this year that I was very happy with. I harvested 3 bucks with that bullet and was extremely happy. I think I'll stay with that next season. So guys, I hope you enjoy the rest of the video here. Again, be sure to subscribe, share, follow along. My hope is that over the next few months here, we're going to have more and more stories, both about my hunts from this past season and seasons prior, but also lots of content about how you can take your training and your physical preparation, your mental preparation, and just be a more effective predator by way of your physical prep, which is such a key piece to hunting the way that I do, mostly stalking and tracking, whether here in the Northeast or I'm hunting elk in the West, mule deer, etc. That is the way I love to hunt, as our ancestors did, and you really need to be physically prepared enough to be able to do it that way and be effective. So that's what Ridgeline Athlete is truly here to bring to the hunting population, but also hunt or not, backcountry adventure is such an amazing opportunity to explore wild places that we have access to. And the fitter, more prepared that you are, the more fun you're going to have. So keep charging, guys. We'll see you on the next one. At around 9 a.m., I reached about 3,000 feet in elevation. I found a bed and a scrape made the day before. Having crossed his track several times prior on my way up the mountain, I knew that this buck was likely nearby. He hadn't started chasing does and really gotten into the rutting behavior. So I changed my tactics, began calling every couple hundred yards, and really sneaking, still hunting, and stalking this buck, as I knew he likely wasn't far away.
Morning. First day up north. Been sneaking through this. It's like softwood. It's pretty grown up, or they just steep enough they couldn't cut up here. A lot of moose. But I keep seeing a big buck track. Sneaking down through here, and I look down this lane, and there's like a blowdown here, and I've been standing there for a couple minutes, and then I look, and I can see a buck staring at me. He's not staring at me anymore. Oh boy. I haven't walked up to him yet, but man, sometimes things just work out. This is an area that I've been in before. Oh boy. Oh, that's a big deer. That is a big buck. Golly. Wow. What a buck. This is a great big thick northern deer. Cool rack, just tall,
6, good mass. Yeah, I'm tickled. First day up here, and this is an area that I've been in the past. I actually followed one of my old tracks kind of along the ridge here for a little bit, and then from 2 years ago, and then worked my way into this kind of new country here. And when I came up in, I was working my way across some cuts, and I could see there was several bucks. I actually followed a smaller buck up onto the ridge, and it was a day or so old, but he took me past, whether it was this big fella or another one, a big buck track, again, that wasn't fresh. So I just kind of worked my way through here, just, you know, hoping that I was going to come across a track that was, you know, fresh enough that I could follow it and be in the game. But I went into my grunting. We're all grunt and move and grunt and move. And I'd probably started that 300 yards from here. And I had stopped. I was looking at my Onyx and just kind of getting my bearings for how I wanted to make my way around. There's a great big basin here, and I wanted to make my way around it. And I kind of figured out my path, and as I looked down through this lane, I see his head pop up. There's a big blowdown here, and he had worked his way up and was looking back up, you know, kind of in my direction. So, and I think that he probably heard me grunting, but you could see as I backtracked him here, you could see he had kind of swung and worked his way up here, and he was nibbling on this this blowdown when I saw him, and I could just see his head, and you know, I could see his antlers, but all I had was basically from here up. So I plugged him right there, and down he went, and we didn't have to waste a whole lot of ammo. And now I got all day to get him out, and I'm sure he's over 200. He's thick deer. I don't know, I'd say probably, he's not super long, maybe 215-ish will be my guess. It's early season, so they're heavier this time of year. But yeah, I'm absolutely tickled. This is just a beautiful buck, and I'm very thankful to the deer gods for allowing our paths to cross. And yeah, just gotta keep charging. It just goes to show that you know, when early in the season we didn't have fresh snow. There is snow, so I went up into an area that, you know, that I knew, that I had found bucks in the past. Actually, not too far from here, a few years ago, I called in a small buck, and I just knew that early season I tended to find pockets of deer up here. It's pretty high up, but I think the bucks still are kind of in early season, like seek mode, and they're up high. That was my thought anyway, and this time it proved to be accurate. We're about 3,200 feet here. But yeah, you gotta be, you know, use your intuition and go to those areas that you've put the time into before, or at least start there, and then that allows you to have a plan, you know, going into the woods. So I felt good going in today, even though I didn't have a fresh track. I knew that I was potentially going into country that I had researched in the past on foot, and that makes you feel more confident when you're putting the miles in, looking for them, and sometimes it all works out. So, all right, just shot this real beautiful northern buck, and I just switched to these Fusion bonded bullets. I'd been shooting copper, and I couldn't get, I was having a hard time getting the bullets that I'd been shooting. So anyway, I tried these, and they shot real well. And I also like that they're a shorter bullet. So in these pumps, sometimes a longer bullet's more apt to get hung up when you're cycling through shells. So anyway, made the switch, and I hit this deer, and you can see great big thick northern deer here. He was downhill of me looking up, and I had this here, but base of his neck basically, and so I hit him there, and it went all the way through, and we got a good exit here on the other side. So my feeling is that that bullet stayed pretty well intact. By the way the exit hole looked there, I think that probably we had some good, expansion to the bullet as well. I mean, those copper bullets I was shooting did real well. I had passed through on an animal last year, and the wound channel wasn't, too catastrophic. But on these big deer, you want to make sure that bullet does its job and gets in there, because these are big boned, thick animals. They're not like your kind of like Middle Western and Southern whitetail breed. This northern tier, Canadian tier of whitetail is a much thicker animal. So anyway, just my feedback. First animal that I've shot with him, so it worked out all right. I'm awful happy because he didn't go anywhere, and I think that the bullet did a real good job. This is kind of cool. So I backtracked this buck, and I shot him right over there, that down tree where I shot him. Here's his track. So he was headed down and not going very hard. He's certainly not chasing does. My guess is that he was looking for a place to bed, or he had just got up because he's feeding. But anyway, he's going downhill and gets down. So we're probably dropped about 75 yards below where I shot him. And then he comes right over here. Down. Takes a shit here. Stands here. And then turns a 90 degree. More like a 180. And goes right back up. So I had been, there he is there, but I've dragged him down. I was up there a ways. So where I had been calling was up above. This gives you an idea. He'll definitely go 200. This gives you an idea of stride and stagger. Not a giant stride. He is a little bit of a shorter deer, but the stagger kind of tells it all. Then he stops here, just kind of stands here a little bit, and then he works his way up, and he goes up to that blowdown is right up there. He goes all the way back up, and then that's where I saw him and shot him. But I'm certain now that the grunting that I was doing, he was curious. He was just kind of poking along, but was wondering what the heck, who was that other buck hanging out in his territory. The total drag was about 2 miles. Although it was hard, all dragging is hard, it certainly isn't much else I'd rather be doing. In this situation, I had to side hill for 2 to 3 tenths to make sure I ended up on the correct side of one of those spines that runs down off the mountain. After that, it was pretty much all downhill until I got to a clear cut at the bottom. That was hard work. Wow. We're about 2 hours or so into dragging. It's been pretty much downhill. I had to go across the ridge so that I didn't end up on the wrong side of a spine. But now I'm going through this darn clear cut. I'm just resting right now.
It's not fun going through this stuff. Oh my God. You never know when you're gonna drop down a couple feet. His rack gets hung up in the bullshit, but not much else I'd rather be doing. Sun's shining, legs are burning, lungs are burning a little bit. I could use some water, but there's a brook down here, so I'm gonna get my Sawyer straw out and have a little drink, and then I should be hitting the skid road that my truck's parked on. So I've probably got another 3/4 of a mile, something like that. Dragging bucks, baby, gotta love it.